I'm still, I feel like I've spent most of this day shoveling out, and just when I felt like I'm making some headway, I look back at my sidewalk and the snow was right back there again. So thought I'd change it up a little bit for our time together today. This is Defining an Early Childhood Education and Care Multi-Tiered System of Supports Framework. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you. I know more people are going to be coming in the room. We've got a lot to cover today, so just like hold on tight because there's a lot to cover. As Karen said, this is sponsored by Early Childhood Professional Learning. It is part of a series from the Pre2K Project, which was inspired by the kindergarten transition. And some of you, I saw some familiar faces, so just kind of hold on because we have a lot of new colleagues with us today. So those of you that have been with me for this entire series this year, you've heard this before, but I just want to go ahead and talk about it for our friends, our colleagues who are joining us for the first time. This entire series is part of the Pre2K Project, which was inspired by the Kindergarten Transition Advisory Committee report that was actually released way back in 2018. And that report was basically, it was inspired by the Illinois Legislative Assembly trying to get a grasp on some of the difficulties that children and families and even educators were having as children move from early childhood education and care to kindergarten. So this resolution was brought forth, it passed, and that resolution actually called for a kindergarten transition advisory committee to do kind of a brief study and then report to the General Assembly to say, here's where we're zigging, where we should be zagging. Here are some recommendations that can go forth. Some of the things were policy and some of them were just practice. And Cindy Berry kind of got a hold of that report. She's the project director for ECPL and really wanted to see how can we bring this to life. The KTAC report, which is commonly known, you know, in Illinois, if we don't have an acronym for something, we're not satisfied. So the Kindergarten Transition Advisory Committee report is affectionately called the KTAC report, and it is broken down into 3 summary of findings. So kind of like 3 themes: aligned teaching and learning, aligned assessments and data, and strengthening cross-sector partnerships. And what Cindy did is she looked through that and started talking with her colleague, Michelle Escapa, the Kindergarten Individual Development Survey Professional Learning Coordinator, really just tried to come up with what kind of a series might we do that connects early childhood education and care to kindergarten, and therefore the Pre2K Project literally was born. And from that time on, from 2018 up until now, ECPL and kids and the Pre2K Project has been trying to give us more common ground when it comes to having conversations about children transitioning, what we need to do to make that easier for families, what we need to do that make that easier for us, how we can have shared understanding with our early childhood education, care, and kindergarten. And really, I mean, transitioning is EI, so that's birth to 3, and kindergarten to 1st grade. And I must say that during this pandemic, we have really, really learned the value of strengthened cross-sector partnerships when it comes to our children that are transitioning from PI to early childhood, special education, to preschool for all, to preschool for all expansion, to kindergarten, early Head Start to Head Start. And so what we've been doing this whole year is just kind of building towards, I'm going to even actually go back this, so that in parentheses, you see putting it all together is kind of We started out talking about the standards, then we've moved from there to developmentally appropriate practice, to curriculum, and now what does it mean to put it all together? Now, for those of you that are with us for the first time today, it's a series, but it's designed for a la carte as well. So if you were looking to understand about MTSS, you will still be able to do that, although you have not gone through, joined us for all of the previous sessions. The whole purpose of this series is because teaching is hard. The field that we're in, the profession that we're in, it's hard. And one of the things that makes it hard is that when we're given all of these initiatives and reform and standards and monitoring systems and teacher evaluation and oh yeah, remember the children, why we got into all of this in the first place? There's some assembly required, and there's no like, you know, clap 3 times and Tinkerbell will come back to life. None of those things really get us to where we want to be. There's assembly required. We put a lot of hard work in, and then we pray that we get into that zone of smoothish sailing. I'll put it like that. Our final session is going to be March 2nd. It is still going to be about multi-tiered system of supports, but it's going to be the implementing. And the reason why we did this is because when you're talking about MTSS, and she doesn't know I'm gonna do this, but I saw my good colleague, Lori Hensel is on. Lori, if you would just come off mute and give a quick shout out to everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm just here to support Antoinette and see how the early childhood system fits better with our K-12 system, because I think that's the way forward, working together.
So she had no idea I was going to do that at all, but Lori Hensel is a professional learning coordinator for the K-12 Illinois MTSS network. And for 3 years, actually a little bit longer than that, the early childhood MTSS committee, we have been very intentional about collaborating with the Illinois MTSS network, because MTSS, it is a gift. It is a wonderful gift, but when we don't understand it, it can get kind of the lines can get blurred and the water can get a little bit murky. So what we've done is we've broken these final 2 sessions up. There's really no way to talk about defining MTSS, creating and implementing MTSS in a 90-minute session. It would not do the subject matter justice, and it would not do justice to any of you as participants. So we've broken it up. Today, we are specifically talking about defining what it is not, what the federal law says, what the state has to say about it, the history of it. March 2nd, we're going to take all of this information and we're going to start talking about the creating and the implementing, literally packing our bags and taking the show on the road of an evidence-based system that literally can synthesize, whether it's an initiative, whether it's reform, whether it's student attendance, whether it is transitioning children, whatever it is we are called to do as educators. Multi-tiered system of supports is that platform that allows us to organize, synthesize, and implement evidence-based practices to fidelity. So if your schedules will allow, we hope to see you on March 2nd, 2022 from 4 to 5:30, and that will actually be the final session of this series. I am your facilitator today, Dr. Antoinette Taylor. You know, on Facebook, they have this challenge, and the challenge was like where it started and how it's going. So I was looking at this picture and I started having a conversation with with her. And I said, oh, I remember you. Like those were the days where you had your jewelry on and everything was face to face. So I would mind saying, how it started and how it's going now. Flat hair, I do have some lip gloss on, but those earrings and all dolled up like that, that's been back since March 2020, but I do remember her, and soon we'll all be together again face to face. So this is a little bit of information about me. You'll see that I was a part of the national writing team for the DEC's position paper on MTSS. I'm not going to give too much away, but woohoo, that's all I can say about that paper. We'll talk about that a little bit later. As we go through our time together, the goal is going to be to give you back some time towards the end. So we're not going to take an official break at all. Please, please, not only during this professional learning opportunity, but just during this time, intentionally do self-care. If you need to get up, get a break, go get some coffee, some tea, drink some water. Please feel free to do that. Keep the volume up so you can hear me in the kitchen or wherever, and then come on back. Grammar grace. We will have opportunities where you'll be jumping in the chat. We are not going to dot every I and cross every T. As educators, we're very good about that. Even in the chat, well, did I put that semicolon there? We don't care about that. This is a safe space and we're showing grammar grace. So you might have some inventive spelling when you're in the chat. Don't worry about that at all. This is again, self-care and showing grace. Do want to make sure that I'm saying to you that, oh gosh, since March 2020, there have been so many directives and executive orders and guidelines coming, and we would be remiss and be irresponsible if we did not say that anything that's going to be discussed today is not meant to impede or circumvent anything that you see in front of you now. Those first 4 bullet points, and this started with the administration of Donald Trump. It has continued under the administration of Joe Biden. Immediately, the Department of Education continued to say, the law of the land is the law of the land. Yes, there is a pandemic, but the law of the land still must be adhered to, and that is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, and your Every Student Succeeds Act. That includes our state's ESSA plan. We're still bound by that. We all know that we have had so many updates and guidelines from the State Board of Education regarding COVID. Obviously, those things remain in place. As this school year has gone forward, your districts, your directors, if you're in a community-based program, are constantly making decisions. And then for those of you that are in districts where you've got collective bargaining agreements in place, those things, it's like, question number 1, what's the answer? Go back to, what is my district saying? What is my director saying? What is our collective bargaining agreement? So if you hear anything here that seems different from that, we just want to let you know we understand that these first things first. So now it's time for you to jump in, and I want to forewarn you, get ready for that showing yourself some grace, because the next few minutes is all going to be you talking to me. And I want to let you know that this is really meant to be interactive. And so I might have some times where I say, oh my gosh, so-and-so, would you mind coming off mute and sharing a little bit? And I hope that you'll be comfortable to do that. We're all colleagues here. And although I've been blessed to be the person presenting tonight, there's really a lot of wisdom when we can seek and share from each other. So in the chat, go ahead and let me know your current role. Are you an administrator, consultant? If you are a teacher, are you pre-K, kindergarten, or other? Teacher assistant, paraprofessional, family specialist, instructional leader. If it's other, please let us know what that other is and go ahead and put it in the chat. See, already I am getting ready to just get off script. Look at all our related services personnel, social workers. Yes, I love it. I don't have favorites, but I kind of do. So Deanna DeMonico, I hope I said that right. Special ed in the house. Woohoo! Special ed rocks all the time. A lot of social workers on, early childhood principal. Elle Haverson, would you mind sharing? Are you a principal for a Preschool for All program, a principal in a building that has pre-K up? If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your role as a principal.
Sure. I'm an early childhood program, so we have preschoolers in our building for the district.
Thank you so much. And Julie, administrator pre-K through grade 8. Wow. Would you mind sharing, are you a principal or are you your district's like curriculum instructor?
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name's Julie. I'm the Student Services Coordinator for a small district just north of Midway, Central Stickney School District 110. We have pre-K through grade 8, bilingual classrooms for almost every grade up. And yeah, it's a really nice place to work. And I love my little dollies. Yep.
No, thank you for sharing. And I really, I'm so glad that Lori was able to join us tonight because you've got that pre-K through grade 8. And so really that arc between the evidence-based practices and multi-tiered system of support, pre-K, and then transitioning that work effectively and as seamlessly as possible to kindergarten, you're literally walking the walk that we really all of us need to be able to understand, but you're literally living it. FIDA, family specialist, woohoo, family. You are going to hear something on here for families. It's really for all of us, but FIDA, I hope that you will take this information back about MTSS. There's actually 2 pieces in here that we're going to talk about, but MTSS is not one of those need to know bases, really, as no part of education should be. Really, we need our families and the families need us. And again, if the pandemic certainly led us, it was an eye opener to what life is like in school, in an education, when we don't have strong family school partnerships. So there's some information here. Well, all of it goes for family specialists, but there's a couple of pieces in here that are actually written into law in Illinois that you'll be able to take back and hopefully share with your families.
Awesome. Yes.
Hey, Denise, how are you, my dear? Denise has been, well, I'm gonna just read this, and I just call her out every time. Denise is one of our colleagues who was voluntold, like, oh, you've been all this time in these upper grades, and guess what? We need someone in pre-K. Many of us have experienced that when we were in buildings. All of a sudden, you're going to go from this grade to this grade, or you might become an administrator and you're going to go from the principal in a middle school building to a principal in a pre-K or PFA building. And she was actually in first grade for 30 years, and this is her first year in Preschool for All, and she has just literally been on and just soaking up everything that she can learn to just help her in her work. And I appreciate not just Denise, but all of us. Education is seamless and it's meant to be, but there is a difference between pre-K and kindergarten and first grade. And so when we get voluntold for some of these positions and things that we're going to do, we really do need to have that ongoing professional learning opportunities to seek and share from our colleagues. Oh, family engagement coordinator, Patricia, yes. Nikesha, another person, assistant principal, early childhood, 6 months, and worked 19 years in Head Start. And we're so excited that we've had so many Head Start and community-based partners as a part of this series, and I've said this every single time, and I will continue to say it, Illinois AEYC, which is the subdivision of National Association for the Education of Young Children, really partnered with ECPL to get the word out about these professional learning opportunities, because we heard so much right after the pandemic in March, and ECPL was doing a lot of outreach and professional learning during that summer. And every time we had someone on from Head Start or a community-based program, they were literally thanking us and saying, no one is talking to us. We're trying to reach out to districts. We have children that are aging out. We know they're going to be in these schools in the fall, but no one is reaching back. And so from that time on, from hearing that, Cindy has been very, very intentional about making sure that our community-based organizations, our Head Start programs, private preschool programs, really have the information about these webinars. And we have just seen this year has just been the biggest uptick than I've ever seen in our Head Start and community base. And well, Lori, I'm from Penn State. Oh my, well, Lori, you just have to just tell us a little bit about yourself. You are from Penn State, like the Penn State?
Yeah, I'm from Penn State. I work for Penn State Better Kid Care, and we provide professional development, and I'm interested in learning more about multi-tiered systems of support for some upcoming work that we're doing. Yeah, check us out.
I love it. You know, one time last year we were doing one, and someone said, oh, I'm from Hawaii. And we just like, what? And she said something, she was looking for some early childhood professional development, and she put in early childhood professional, and that learning just came up, and it took her straight to the website, and she joined us for several of the, this was a few years ago. She just kind of like became our adopted colleague all the way from Hawaii. So welcome from Penn State, Better Kid Care. I'm assuming that that's like community-based programming.
Yeah, we're part of Penn State Extension. So we provide professional development actually to 49 states and US territories for free, unless you need professional development credit. And then it's $5, but there are a bunch of different courses and things on there that educators can use around all different areas of teaching and learning. So yeah, I'm happy to be learning from you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And we'll make sure that you have our information so that we can, anything we can do to support. And you're in the right place between Lori Hensall and myself. And this is really, really interesting to see. So thank you for being a part.
Thank you.
I think we've kind of answered this, but just in case, I want to be sure, just let us know again, are you community-based, preschool for all? Some are both. And go ahead and put that in the chat as well. Where are you currently practicing? Penny, we will have the next and final one is March 2nd, and that is actually the creating and implementing. Karen she's going to follow up our time together today with an email. She will send that information to you along with a link. I will also let you know that ECPL partners with the Illinois Principals Association, and there's actually we've created a full out administrators academy for MTSS. We can get you the date for that. It's pretty extensive. There's like homework you have to do. Well, there's pre-work you do before the academy. The academy itself is 3 hours, and then there's homework you have to do afterwards in order to get the full academy credit. But we can certainly let you know about that one. But the next one for ECPL is going to be creating and implementing, and that one is on March 2nd. Heather, hello, private preschool, yes. Oh, you're welcome. We'll make sure you get that. Thanks so much, Karen. And we'll look forward to having you on with us that night. So this is always my favorite, like, briefly share where you are when it comes to MTSS. And to jumpstart you, I'll give you some options. You know, this is like, I don't know. That's why I joined tonight. I'm like looking for you to tell me where you are when it comes to MTSS. And it could be any of these answers. It could be, I don't know enough to know what I don't know. We're exploring, building. There's actually the scaling up brief, which I'm really a fan of it. The scaling up brief actually kind of breaks down from the very beginnings of any type of initiative to the end. And the beginning really is exploring. And then the tail end of it is, this is just how we do business. And it's a real arc. Implementation science lets you know that before you can get from that exploring to that this is just how we do business phase, it really is like a 3 to 4 year period. Because as you explore and you develop, you kind of test the waters, then you have to go back and do some more developing. So it's not like a stagnant thing. So wherever you are in this process, exploring and developing. And I love so that a lot of you are putting exploring and developing, because it's kind of like I've started the journey, but I'm still developing even my own understanding of multi-tier system of support. Building and developing, lots of, oh, Stacy, I'm on the MTSS committee for my district to present. Yeah, so Stacy, that's something that we have found. And the truth is, I'll just be honest, in the law, the federal law, talking about when we first, way back when we were referencing this work as RTI, it is K-12, and we're actually going to talk about that tonight. And so I don't want to say it's been a struggle, because obviously the early childhood community was very quick to say, well, wait a minute, if we're building and synthesizing, do we only do that at K up, or should we be doing it at the early childhood education and care level? And the obvious answer to that is yes. However, because there's so much, number one, compulsory age of attendance in most states, including our own, doesn't start until age 6, which for many students, when their birthday falls, that's first grade. And preschool for all, Head Start are strongly encouraged. Preschool for all expansion is strongly encouraged, but not mandated anywhere. And so that's been kind of the struggle for MTSS to really take off at that pre-K level, because many districts, and rightfully so, were trying to get it together and understand it at the K up level. So I think we're going to give you some good things, Stacy, that you'll be able to take back. I will say that starting really February 2020 at the Every Student Succeeds Act conference that IRC does, I think Lori would agree, we saw a lot more districts in our sessions, and many of them were saying, hey, my district sent me here because we need better alignment between pre-K and K. They had maybe real strong high school MTSS, but not middle school and pre-K. So we had a lot of administrators that were in the sessions that we were doing, and they had specifically kind of been sent to get that strong bridge. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because remember the KTAC, Kindergarten Transition Advisory Committee report, that report said if you have strengthened cross-sector partnerships, then you have strength when it comes to children transitioning from pre-K to kindergarten, to first grade, to second grade, to third grade. And a part of that certainly is a strong MTSS system. So Stacy, I know right now, your district it's not applying, but I hope you get some really good information to kind of wave the flag and say, I've got it. And slowly but surely your district will bring that in. But I'm very heartened to see that your district is thinking about this. That's really, really neat. A lot of developing. Okay, yeah, that authentic assessments and do assessments. Where is their place in MTSS versus RTI? What does that look like? We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk more about that when we do the creating and implementing. But yeah, that's been kind of one of the like myths and misconceptions about MTSS and assessment and screening and all of that. Wow, thank you all so much for sharing. And then finally, what do you hope to take with you regarding MTSS from our time together today? That's kind of a big old suitcase. And there's a method to my madness with that suitcase that will kind of show in March 2nd. So in the chat, you can just share what you hope to take with you today from our time together. A lot of people saying a different understanding. Denise, yes. I don't. Denise is like, hey, I'm an open book. I'm a tabula rasa. Anything I get will be great. Absolutely. Stacy, we're going to give you some tools to do that. Yes, what is that role? What, Nikesha, Julie, what exactly is the role in MTSS in early childhood? Okay, so Kaylee, the kind of roles, that's a little bit more on the creating and implementing side, but you'll get it. I think you'll start to get like the light at the end of the tunnel of the roles of a program or district's MTSS team, so to speak, what it could look like. Thanks. Okay, Penny, something that will help us improve our MTSS protocol. Okay. All right, my work is cut out for me. Everybody ready? Okay, let's go. So this is what we're going to try to answer today. What is a multi-tiered system of support? How does a multi-tiered system of supports impact the referral and evaluation process? And that should actually be what is multi-tier system of supports. That is a typo on my end. Sorry about that. Evidence-based research, what are tiers? Just a couple of questions. And literally tiers, not tears, which Lori and I can tell you, there's been some tears shed about MTSS for real. There's been some tears. Thank you, Lori, for reminding me of that, even to remind myself that grace. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that, Lori Hensel. So we're going to start off with the truth. I'm dating myself here. Remember this gentleman from Dragnet? The facts, ma'am, just the facts. So we're going to start out to really get that understanding of like literally the Facebook post, where it started and how it's going. We're going to go back to the federal perspective. The baseline or starting point of all of our MTSS discussions really does need to go back to the letter of the law. And then with most laws, the letter of the law is so specific. It's the intent and implementation that gets, again, where the lines get blurred and the water gets a little bit murky. So where do we first even hear about this. The tenets of response to intervention was referenced in the former No Child Left Behind Act, as well as in the current. And that word current there is huge, because although No Child Left Behind has been reauthorized and is now known as Every Student Succeeds Act, the Individuals with Disability Education Act has not been reauthorized. For years, we've been trying to get it reauthorized. The true goal of the Obama administration, to be honest, was to reauthorize No Child Left Behind and IDEA at the same time, so that that federal law about students with disabilities and the federal law about elementary education, that they would kind of speak to each other more. And honestly speaking, a lot of work was done at the federal level, in the Senate and in the House. And as it is sometimes with law, you have to, a decision is made, okay, what can really authentically move forward and what cannot. And so No Child Left Behind, the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind and the reauthorization of IDEA was put on pause again, although it should be reauthorized every 7 years. So why is that important? Because the tenets of RTI, which is what it was known as then, is embedded within Individuals with Disability Education Act. And what you see is why. Because it represents systemic method of evaluating the needs of all students, looking at positive outcomes, understanding how to select and implement interventions. The RTI model itself, it's multi-tiered because the needs of children are multi-tiered. The needs of teachers working with students is multi-tiered. The instruction starts at that universal level, right? What are we doing for every student? What are the things that as educators, we know is important? And so regardless of ability, disability, twice exceptionality, gifted and talented, student who is a multilingual learner, students who are experiencing temporary homelessness. There's some parts of education that we know is just good universal practice for every single child that comes into the building. We also know that some children need a little bit more from us. And how we determine what that little bit more is we monitor the progress of their learning based off of our teaching. We collect data, we analyze it, and then we use that data to help us make decisions for the universal practices and those students who need a little bit more targeted support, and then those students who may even need universal targeted and then more individual or more intensive supports. So it's very important that although No Child Left Behind was reauthorized, IDEA is current. Those tenets about interventions, evidence-based, having a multi-tiered approach, just like domains of development is multi-tiered. Children are not stacked, right? All of those parts are still in the tenets of IDEA. Now, going back to that slide I had before about first things first, and what did they say to us when COVID started? The federal law of the land is still the federal law of the land. So let's just look at that IDEA a little bit. Early on, when No Child Left Behind was the law of the land and states were creating their RTI plans, the Office of Special Education Programs got wind of the fact that there was already misconception about RTI, response to intervention, and students with disabilities because of this. You've got the evaluation It represents a systemic method for evaluating the needs of all students. One of the misconceptions, one of the myths of RTI and trying to understand the letter of the law and the intent of the law was, oh, well, that means if a student is referred for an evaluation, we have to press pause because now the law says we have to do RTI with those students. And so all over our country, families and children were being denied a referral because one of two things, either we haven't done RTI or we were doing RTI but didn't have enough data. So by January 2011, the Office of Special Education Programs sent out a memo to all state superintendents. This is just an excerpt of what that memo says. You do have a link for it, and we will share that with you all in the follow-up email you get from Karen. Many organizations got involved with this. CEC is the Council for Exceptional Children. And they too were starting to hear advocates from states were reaching out to the Council for Exceptional Children saying, wait a minute, we're now being told that if we are concerned about a child's ability to learn, that we cannot do a referral or even begin the referral and evaluation process because districts are telling teachers, districts are telling families, well, wait a minute, you have to do RTI first. So everything you see before you hear, Office of Special Education Programs, Department of Education, the Council for Exceptional Children, our own State Board of Education started trying to get the word out and let it be known, wait a minute, the letter of the law says this. The intent of the law is not to delay or deny any process at all for children suspected of having a disability. The intent of the law is not to say, well, we're doing all these universal practices, but so-and-so has an IEP or the 504 plan, so they don't need these universal practices. These memos all went out. Now you'll notice in 2016, for those of us that were talking about, well, my district was not even understanding, is MTSS and early childhood, like can there be an arranged marriage? The answer is yes. In 2016, the Office of Special Education Programs went back and sent out a memo about RTI and preschool, where they specifically said, okay, we know that states are practicing MTSS, or at that time RTI, in early childhood. We support that. It makes sense to do that. Here's what you must understand about it. Our own state in 2009, in their Illinois State Board of Education, Educational Rights and Responsibilities, actually created a whole chapter about RTI and students with disabilities and the rights of parents and the responsibilities of schools. This was revised and updated and released August of 2020. I was invited to be to add some language on the chapter about RTI. And really what they did was updated it so that we're not talking about RTI, but based under ESSA, it's referenced as MTSS. And then you'll see the Council for Exceptional Children, they beat everybody to the punch. They were on it by 2008. We have a link for the state board, the 2020, we have that as a resource. Here is what it technically says. And then they have a whole chapter that explains that and gives resources for families, gives resources for teachers, gives resources to districts. This is an excerpt from the original letter from the Office of Special Education Programs that went out in, I told you, 2011. And then here is an excerpt of what CEC was saying way back in 2008. Now, all of these dates will make a little bit more sense when we get to the history of RTI. I'll go back and I'll reference. So you see, as we were moving from the law about RTI to its implementation, these years, 2008, this was happening, 2009, this was happening. It'll make a lot more sense to you all. Look at that last bubble there. RTI data does not provide sufficient data to rule out or identify a disability. As it is, you know, with most things, the spectrum went like this. The pendulum went whoop. So a lot of districts, and I just have to say, you know, when I'm showing my screen, I can't see everybody. So Julie, Egan, you are giving me life because your head is like, yes, sister, keep going, Dr. Taylor, I got you. So you can't see everyone, but so the people you can see, they really kind of become you're like my co-facilitators. So thank you. I'm seeing Julie Chandler is, oh, two Julies, both of you, the shaking of your heads, it's like really, really giving me life. So I appreciate it. The pendulum went like this.
Question, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
So in that green bubble, where is the balance between having enough evidence to approve a referral because the teacher does need data versus where's the balance there?
Okay, so the first answer to that question is, it is not a referral or the MTSS or the data. It's actually both. Anybody, just special ed wise, we know that the referral is just that. It's somebody saying, wait a minute, there's been some consistent teaching going on with an expectation of this outcome, but for this particular child, here's the expected outcome, but this is the achievement of the child. So the data really is what the teacher has been collecting all along. And this is where, somebody called security because somehow the soapbox just got here and has joined this webinar. This is why the voice of the teacher is so important. You have been working with that student. You are, and not to minimize frontline and essential workers, you know, of hospital staff and everything, you know, I'm not minimizing it at all, but let's not underestimate that frontline on the ground essential work that teachers do, where a teacher can say, I know this student, something is not right here. The data comes where you can say, because I've been teaching this, we've been using the standards, the child, this particular student is, when we assess, whether it's an interim assessment, a formative assessment, whether it's a curriculum-based assessment, there is a struggle, and it's not struggle, I don't want to use that phrase. There's a gap, right? So there's a gap between the expected outcome and the achievement of the child. Qualitative data, when that teacher can say, we did small group instruction, and then I did some more, you know, one-on-one with the child. If it's a preschool for all expansion program, we know that there's choice time, right? Where the children are just kind of out there independently exploring and inquiry. You're up there, they're taking notes, right? They've been talking to the children. Qualitative data is data. It does not have to be quantitative. That is that voice of the teacher saying, hey, I'm not sounding alarm, but I think we need to investigate a little bit further. But it's literally just a referral, right? A referral may not lead to an evaluation. If it does, the teaching and learning doesn't stop because a child is evaluated. Right? So that data collection is ongoing because we're still teaching. We don't put, you know, as they say, nobody puts baby in a corner. We don't put baby in a corner and say, well, baby's going through the referral and evaluation process. No, they're still our child. We're still teaching. We're still collecting data. We are still, and literally response to intervention means we instruct, we check the response. The response is, what is that level of achievement that the child knows and is able to do? That's the achievement gap. I know they know it, but how are they able to apply that behavior, knowledge, or skill? So that teaching and learning based off of the standards, what children know and should be able to do, that is an ongoing process. So with the referral, the letter and the intent is whatever evidence is there comes to the table as part of the referral. Then the team digs a little bit deeper and then either says there's enough evidence to support that we might need to investigate further and rule something in or rule something out. Then that becomes the next step. If there's not enough evidence, the answer has to be, it cannot be, well, you haven't done enough. That's like telling a teacher you haven't taught enough. We might want to ask them for more information, but not having that more information is not in and of itself the reason to deny the referral. It's literally just, hey, I'm asking a question, let's see. Now, say you have the information and maybe it turns out that the child has a lot of chronic absence, right? Of course, the level of expectation is here, achievement is here. The child is hardly in school. So then you might deny the referral, but then what's the plan? And that's the importance about MTSS, because MTSS is constantly looking at evidence-based practices and putting them into place, but it keeps you from having to do all these evidence-based practices separately. No one can do that well. So no, the child isn't learning well. We see that attendance is an issue here. So that referral is denied. We put some type of attendance plan in place for the child. And this is just a hypothetical, maybe it's attendance. We put that plan in place for the child. The family has to be fully informed so that we can all work together. And then we're going to see what happens. So that's where it can't rule in and it can't rule out. So the pendulum can't say, nope, 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 we can't do anything because we haven't done RTI. And then the pendulum was also, people were saying, well, they're telling me my child has autism because they did RTI. First of all, RTI is not something you do. Uh-oh, I'm on the soapbox again. Leave me alone. I'm trying to do this presentation, right? RTI is not something we do to children, okay? You implement it. It's part of your fabric of your program and your curriculum, but it's not what we do to children. In Illinois, this is specifically drawn out even more. 2020, the governor signed an omnibus. It's commonly known as the omnibus bill. Now, if you haven't read it, I just don't know why, everybody. It was only 700 pages long. Let's get ourselves together, right? Like, oh, we should have read that when we were sheltering in place. What else did we have to do besides read this 700-page document? Some of us are still trying to go back to this, like, wait a minute. Wasn't that in the omnibus bill? But one of the things that was in that bill, folks like myself have been advocating for this for years, was very specific language about students with IEPs and multi-tiered system of supports. And here's what the law says. Copies of all written materials that are going to be considered has to be given to the family 3 days in advance of the IEP team meeting. Why? Because an IEP meeting, it is emotional for the family. A family member should not be expected to take in and process all of that information and then be able to make an informed decision about their child as part of the team when they're just getting information all thrown at them at the day of the meeting. Now that written materials, those are all of the, we instructed. Well, how did you instruct? Did we use small group? Did we use, what type of assessments do we use? What type of, what were the standards you were focusing on? All the things that are part of the child's education that we're using to make decisions, the family gets that. Look at that second bullet point. Who's a part of the collaboration team? The parent and the guardian. That is part of the law, because the intent is for families not to have to come to a meeting and be blindsided with teachers or case managers saying, oh, we've been doing this for, all quarter. And the family is sitting there saying, this is the first that I heard that my child was kind of struggling in this area. Doesn't mean that the family, each and every family member has to be on your MTSS team for your district, your program, your school. No. Do we need to fully inform parents of the concern we might have when we see that the instruction, the techniques, the strategies, the scaffolding, the differentiating, all that we're doing to reach all of the children, when we have a concern that that child's response to instruction, and the truth is, instruction, good instruction is the intervention. And so that again goes back to the voice of the teacher, the building principal. Well, we don't know what intervention to do. When you show up in that classroom every day, when you show up in that building, whether you show up on that Zoom or Google platform or whatever, all these virtual platforms we've had to get ourselves familiar with since March, you are the best intervention they have. That instruction, that embedded understanding of assessment, that implementing the curriculum to fidelity, understanding like, wait a minute, this student is absent a lot. That knowledge, that instruction, that's truly the intervention. And so the progress monitoring is, as Dr. Phil would say, how's that going for the child? That written notice of use of scientific research-based interventions, of multi-tiered system of support, and that is not a typo, that's actually the way it's written in the law. The family should have access to that. Because really, we should be partnering and engaging with the family. Now, for those of you that said, well, I'm a family specialist in my district or at my program, would you bring in every family member to be a part of your MTSS team? No, that wouldn't make sense. But the voice of the family, right? So a family engagement specialist or family support specialist, that could be a very good member to be a part of a district or a program or a school's MTSS team. Okay? So again, this is the law in Illinois, Public Act 101-0643, actually signed into law July 1, 2020 with immediate effect. So now we're going to kind of go down memory or history so that you can get the historical context of MTSS. Like it started out as RTI, how do we get to MTSS? When the No Child Left Behind Act was signed into law, it was a heavy lift for our country. And anytime you have a heavy lift, the federal Department of Ed doesn't just say, okay, this was signed into law, tomorrow you better have a plan, get it together. That it was multi-year. So after No Child Left Behind was signed into law, each district had until the beginning of the 2010-2011 school year to be able to implement the use of a process that determines how children respond to research-based interventions as part of their evaluation procedure. Again, what you see here is the letter of the law. As part of the evaluation procedure, the intent was not for it to impede the procedure, delay it, deny it, or supplanted, or substituted. It just had to be a part of it. Whatever the state was creating had to permit evidence of the process used, had to document, as we've said before, we're teaching this way, we're documenting the progress of students, and it really is meant to be strength-based. Somewhere along the way, the default of RTI became, it wasn't strength-based or asset-based, it became deficit-based. Well, all these kids can't do that, they're RTI kids. It was meant to be very strength-based. What are we doing? How are we doing it? When are we doing it? How are the children responding to it? How do we respond to their response? It's very cyclical. And then you document the achievement of the student's progress according to the standards. So that pulls back in again, the state standards. That's an equity piece. If you're a Head Start partner, the Head Start framework. So it's all an equitable piece that we have that levels the playing field for children. In Illinois, this is how we went through the process. So if the Department of Education is saying by 2010, 2011, all states had to be able to have this implemented within their districts, Illinois set forth to create a statewide RTI plan by January 2008 to submit to the Federal Department of Education. Once this Department of Education approved the plan, then from January 1, 2009, the State Board of Education then turns this plan over to districts and says, begin to create your implementation process. So from 2009 to the beginning of the 2010-11 school year, which is July 1, 2010, districts were creating their plans and were supposed to be doing professional learning across the entire district from January 1, 2009 to July 1, 2010. That's a long time if you think about it. So my point in sharing this with you is a couple of things. We constantly feel like, oh my gosh, another thing we have to do, we have so much on our plate. That's true. But the history of this lets us know that this has been woven into the fabric of education literally since the No Child Left Behind law. And there was time built in for it to be created at the state education level, which is ISB, transitioned to districts, and then for districts to sufficiently prepare programs, principals, teachers, families to understand and implement July 1, 2010. As we saw here before, the law is specific about K up. But look at that last point. And Julie Chandler, I want to thank you for just kind of shouting out. As I said before, there's a lot to kind of cover here. So I don't want you all just sitting there. If you have a question, if you see things like, oh, wait a minute, just come off mute and just ask me and we can stop and make sure we address. So Penny, I'm asking, should MTSS special education evaluation occur simultaneously? Yes. So I want to just reiterate that again. They do occur simultaneously because MTSS is a part of your teaching and learning process, right? So and let's just, okay. I don't have my little water teacup here. We all know that evaluation process can take forever. you start like, didn't he get a consent for evaluation in September? Well, when is the meeting? Girl, January, right? Because it's by law, once that consent for evaluation is signed, it can be 60 school days before the team convenes to hold the meeting to rule in or out a disability. So anytime there's a professional learning day, that doesn't count. If there's a holiday, that doesn't count. 60 days has sometimes felt like 3 months. What's happening to that child in that 3 months? We're teaching, we're collecting data, we're looking at the response. Yeah, Dakita, many of us have been like, I can't take it, but that is a part of the federal law that's really, it's put in place to keep us from rushing to judgment on the child and just saying, well, everybody knows you have autism, just write it down on the paper and let's go. Well, what process did you use to say that the child, what was the evidence you collected to rule this disability in or out, right? Yeah, 60 long years is what it feels like, Penny, absolutely. So that process is there so that we do not rush to judgment. And that same process is sometimes the thing that makes it feel like, oh my gosh, this is forever. The ownership of that child, and that's why I keep saying it's our child. This is still our student. It's still our child that we are teaching. That last box that you see is where the people started saying, well, whole school, isn't early childhood a part of whole schools? Right? We started thinking about it. Remember that definition in the law? Do we need an early childhood multi-tiered approach to student learning? Yes. Do we need to monitor children's progress? Do we need to collect data to help us understand how our children are learning? What support teachers need in order to do the job we're asking them to do? Yes. And so all of that became a part of the conversation as No Child Left Behind was being reauthorized to Every Student Succeeds Act. So much so that with Every Student Succeeds Act, there's a lot of spelling out that happened. ESSA provides greater flexibility to states for MTSS to be integrated and accomplish these goals. So very specifically talked about students with disabilities. Oh my gosh, Lori and I've had so many conversations about this. What about our high-performing students? And that was that part of RTI that became very deficit-based in many people's views as they were implementing and creating. It's like, well, who doesn't reach the cut score? Okay, that's an RTI kid. What about your children that are, they're like jumping over, out of the bowl? What supports do they need? Students who are multilingual learners, students receiving special education services, mental and behavioral health. In ESSA, they also talked about the important need for what? Necessary ongoing professional development. ESSA also replaced scientific-based research with the word evidence-based, because we had a lot of confusion with No Child Left Behind. Well, what does scientific-based research mean anyway? ESSA uses evidence-based, and in the law, they not only use it, but they define evidence-based in what? Tiers. So what is scholarly review is the top notch of evidence-based, and then there's innovative. So that innovative is like, well, we don't have enough evidence yet to say it's scholarly reviewed, but there's some momentum going with this particular practice. That means we need to study it more and keep it's innovative enough. There's some evidence, but it's not that top tier. And for evidence-based, it's got to be proven to be effective in leading and sustaining student outcomes and improving student achievement. So then we look at MTS. What is it? It's a collaborative, multi-tiered approach to identifying and meeting the needs of all. Who is all? ESSA defined that for us. All is students with disabilities, all is students who are multilingual learners, all is students who have advanced ability, all is students who are twice exceptional. One child meets the criteria for specialized services because of a disability, and they also meet the criteria of gifted and talented, which there is a law that defines gifted and talented in our country. The purpose of MTSS is to really make sure that we have evidence-based, high-quality curriculum experiences for all children. It's literally about the whole child. It's about the whole school. And if you look at this, it's that same language from before. And now we talk about teachers. Teachers have unique needs and abilities too. That's what professional learning is all about. That's what PLCs are all about. How can we support the educators so that the educators and building administrators can adequately support the children? More and more, the early childhood community starts saying, well, how is it that all of these things are good for K up, but not good for pre-K, early childhood education and care? Isn't early childhood, if you think of the full spectrum, early childhood is birth to age 8, right? NAEYC says that. Division of Early Exceptional Children, the DEC says that. Well, look there. Then that means pre-K falls into school age. So do we really want to have a practice in our country that addresses K up, but then doesn't remember that KTAC report, strengthen cross-sector partnerships, aligned teaching and learning, aligned assessments? There's overlap. And there's enough overlap to say, okay, the letter of the law says it's whole child, it's prevention focused, it's proactive, it's evidence-based, it's developmentally appropriate, it's equity. The intent of the law, for whom? Just because the law only said K-12, the intent of the law would be for which children? All of our children who are in structured educational settings. And you're right, Penny, pre-K matters, right? And we know it matters. So then, if it's a K-12 initiative and it's supposed to be whole child, prevention, proactive, evidence-based, can we not say the question is answered? MTSS is for all, including early childhood education and care, students and teachers. Because if we provide high quality curriculum experiences and instruction for all children and provide a continuum and variety of supports and services for all children at the early childhood education and care level, then aren't we sending stronger children into kindergarten? Aren't we sending stronger practices into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade? Of course. DEC was in the forefront of this. And I'm really happy to say that years ago, DEC, NAEYC, and the National Head Start Association got out there and said, wait a minute, everyone, we need to understand RTI and the frameworks of RTI in early childhood. I was not a writer on this paper. I was a contributor. We had this big meeting when the draft was out, and we, after the public comment of the draft, there was a big meeting. I believe it was in 2012, which I went to, and we literally sat and looked at that paper and went over every single point of it. And then about 6 months after that, the framework came out. And it was a strong framework because DEC, NAEYC, and National Head Start, because they were the ones that were saying community-based programs really need something to synthesize all of these integrated pieces of work they have to do. Head Start needs that. We have a link of that paper here for you. And then we have to interrupt this program for breaking news because, woohoo, DEC, based off of Every Student Succeeds Act, met with NAEYC, met with NHSA and said, hey, we want to revise this paper to keep it relevant. We've transitioned from No Child Left Behind to Every Student Succeeds Act. RTI was kind of like the toddler. MTSS is RTI all grown up. I was a writer on this paper and it was just released in December. So excited about that. We have a link to it for those of you that may not be able to join, but when we do creating and implementing, we're definitely going to break that paper down because we specifically put information in that paper about students with disabilities, students who are multilingual learners. I'm really, really proud of the paper. It took us from 2017 when we started talking about it to 2021 when it actually came out. Obviously, the pandemic slowed it down a little bit, but it's really well written. And I'm not just saying that because I was a writer on the team. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. This actually is the definition that was created by Lori Hensel and their team at the Illinois MTSS Network. And what Cindy Berry did, ECPL facilitates the Early Childhood MTSS Collaborative. We literally took that definition and just adopted it so that we could, again, strengthen that cross sector so that pre-K folks would be saying, well, that's not how we define it. And K folks are saying, that's how we define it. There's one definition, and this is the one that we use in Illinois. This is what it is not. It's not a special education initiative. And we've talked about a lot of this earlier. Not a program, a curriculum, a strategy, or an intervention. This is where things got a little wonky, using my Lisa Kudrow from Friends. She always made up words, and wonky was one of her words. It was that data piece. And I like to call this section, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the triangle come first, or did the data come first? The truth is, the data of multi-tiered system of supports came first. Scholarly review, collection of data showed us that 80 to 90% of all children do well with universal practices. About 5 to 10% of those children need some more targeted support, and about 1 to 5% of children in any classroom or any program or in a district need more intensive individualized support. So actually the data came first. As it happens, usually when data comes out, some type of pictograph comes with it. For RTI, it turned into this green, yellow, and red. Wave the flag, red students, right? But the truth is, we forgot the data was telling us universal practices. Secondary just means not the student is at risk, their self, but the student needs some more support. We never stop our universal, right? We just, we layer on. We continue to layer on. Somehow this turned into this. Oh, you know, he's an RTI kid. That's a tier 1 student, tier 2 student. And it got wonkier and wonkier and wonkier. Because instead of us using the data to inform our practices, we got bound by this triangle. And that triangle started telling us what to do. But the truth is, it could have been a bar graph, could have been a pie chart. The look of the data was less important than the data itself. But it made us get all, again, wonky. And that turned RTI into this deficit-based, well, what's the cut score? This kid is a tier 1, this one is a tier 2, this one is a tier 3, that's an RTI kid. That's just like saying he's an IEP kid, he's a 504 kid. That's not friendly, student-friendly language. And it actually goes against the intent and the letter of the law. So instead, when we take control of the triangle, look at this. I don't see, where's the red? How come you have the top part red? Because it doesn't make a difference. It takes all of these, and this is what I can't wait till March 2nd. We're gonna pack that suitcase. Remember that suitcase? What do you want to take with you? What are the universal supports? And I mean, everything goes in there. Southwest Airlines, first bag flies free, right? We're gonna stuff so much in that universal practices, and think about implementation to fidelity. Because that universal tier, that's the seed that you plant, and literally everything springs up from that seed that you plant. So a whole lot happens in that universal area. And we remember that the practices and supports are in tiers, not children, not educators, not schools, not districts. I love this pictograph, even though it says response to intervention. I still use this a lot when I'm talking about our MTSS with legislators or just even when I'm presenting, because of that side piece that kind of takes that stagnant, stacked green, yellow, red, and then you see how it meshes them in together almost like watercolors? I love it because it kind of lets us know children aren't stacked, domains of development isn't stacked, teaching isn't stacked, even the standards aren't stacked like that. There's kind of this everything flowing into and impacting each other. Size of instructional group, intensity, frequency, universal, increased monitoring, intensive monitoring. This is like one of my favorite things. And I always put in educators because, again, if you remember what educators need and you take care of your educators and you take care of your principals, they're going to take care of the students, and you'll have whole schools, you'll have whole communities, and you'll have whole children. Whew, that was a lot, you all. Everybody okay? As we close, go ahead in the chat, get your thinking caps on. When you think of your own practice, briefly describe or pick one thing from our time together that resonates with you the most, and go ahead and put that in the chat. Oh, thank you, Penny. A lot of work. That the paper was wrote. We started talking about it at the DEC conference in 2017 in Oregon, and we were like, we're going to have this paper done, and by 2018 it's going to be out and ready to go. 2018 we were sitting in Orlando saying, well, we have a draft. And then 2019 it still wasn't ready to come out. And then of course the pandemic hit, kind of slowed things up a little bit, but 2021 we did get it out there. Yes, Julie's like, I'm ready to pack that suitcase. Stacy, how important teacher voice is when we see our students need extra support. Absolutely. Lori Henshaw, MTSS is not whole, that's a t-shirt, Lori. MTSS is not whole school without pre-K. Absolutely. I mean, when the CDC talks about whole school, whole child, whole community, it is our youngest learners. Students are not in tears. Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you, Sandy. Lori, MTSS is a parallel process for children and educators. Nakisha, MTSS is for teachers too. And in the IPA Academy, I present that with my good friend and colleague, Kim Nelson. We actually do a whole piece there because administrators are like the superintendents and, you know, district curriculum, so and so. We actually do a whole part in there where we walk them through understanding that you've got to have whatever you want students to learn, you're asking the teachers to be the one that give them the information. So you must have a non-punitive, asset-based system of support in place for teachers as well as students. Love it. Thank you all so much for sharing. I'm trying to be a woman of my word. We're coming up on 5:26, right? So I'm trying to be kind of honest. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. 4 minutes to spare. I hope you all did, you know, exemplify self-care. I was trying to talk loud in case anybody needed to go and, you know, get some water or some tea from the kitchen or wherever. Hope to see you March 2nd. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, with this snow and everything, there's just so much going on. We don't take it lightly at all that you all have joined us. Some of you have literally been with us from September on, and some of you have done a la carte. Either way, oh, hey, Anissa, how are you? I didn't see you there. We don't take it lightly at all that you work all day and then spend an hour and a half of your evening with me here. We definitely don't take it for granted at all. For our colleague from Penn State, drop your email into the chat. We'll make sure that we connect with you, see how we can collaborate and support. You know, we've got Penn State, now we've got Hawaii, so whatever we can do to make this work national, we're so happy to do that. And I'm going to turn you over to